Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, good evening. The Hillsborough City Council is now called to order. We will be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom. Council members and staff are participating from remote locations to practice appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting as noted in the agenda. Lisa, may we please have roll call?
Schwang,
Present.
Cole,
Present.
May,
Here.
Krolik,
Here.
Royce.
Present.
Thank you.
Public comment. Members of the public may provide public comments on the item on the closed session agenda via the Zoom platform by using the raise hand feature or of calling in by phone by pressing *9 on the telephone keypad. In response, the town will unmute the speaker and allow them to speak for up to 3 minutes. All members of the public will be limited to one comment per closed session item. I will now open public comment. Lisa, do we have any hands raised?
No, Mayor, no members of the public present.
Okay. With that, I will now close public comment and now see a conflict of interest. And this portion of the meeting is for any council member to disclose any conflicts of interest relating to any closed session items. Any council member who has confirmed a conflict of interest or has reason to believe that they may have a conflict of interest should disclose the conflict for the record and abide by the disqualification requirements as contained in the FTPC regulations. Do we have any conflicts of interest on any of the closed session items? Is there any hands raised? Okay, seeing none, I will note there is no conflict of interest for the closed items. So now we'll move to the public announcement of the closed session items. We have 2 closed session items for this evening. The first one is conference with labor negotiations, Government Code Section 54957.6. Agency negotiator Glenn Birkenheimer and Chris Armbruster, employee organization Teamsters Local 856, Public Works and Clerical. And item B, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, Government Code Section 54956.9, paren D, paren 1. Brad Baru, Kath Baru et al. Versus Town of Hillsborough in DOES 1-100 inclusive, San Mateo County Superior Court, case number 16CIVO-2284. With that, we'll now adjourn to closed session and leave this Zoom meeting. The city council meeting is scheduled to begin the regular meeting in open session at 6 p.m. through Zoom. So with that, we'll leave this session and adjourn to closed session.
Okay.
Okay, if we're ready, we will now call our Hillsborough City Council meeting for August to order. We are conducting today's meeting in a remote virtual setting using Zoom. Council members and staff are participating from remote locations to practice appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting as noted on the agenda. Members of the public may provide public comments via the Zoom platform by using the raise hand feature or calling in by phone by pressing *9 on the telephone keypad. If a member of the public wants to provide public comment on an agenda item or a non-agenda item during the general public comment portion, they shall request to speak by using the raise hand feature on Zoom prior to the close of the public comment period for agenda items or non-agenda items. And then in response, the town will unmute the speaker and allow them to speak for up to 3 minutes. All members of the public will be limited to one comment per agenda item and one comment per non-agenda item. Lisa, could you please take the roll call?
Schwang,
Present.
Cole,
Present.
May,
Present.
Krolik,
Present.
Royce.
Present. Could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the
to the
flag
flag
of the
of the
United States of America.
America
To the republic.
and to the republic for which it stands,
Nation.
one nation,
Under God.
under God,
Indivisible.
indivisible, with
With
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for all. Thank you. You may sit. Next item on the agenda is a report from the closed session. We have nothing to report. So that will move into the item on the minutes from our June 3rd, 2021, our June 12th, 2021, and our July 12th, 2021 meetings. I will ask my colleagues individually if they have any corrections to the minutes for either of those 3 dates. Councilmember Schwang? Do we have
None.
any corrections?
None.
Councilmember Cole?
None.
Councilmember May?
None.
Vice Mayor Krolik?
I just had one on page 5. It said Mayor Krolik reported she visited 915 Link and spoke to the Bernsteins. I may have said that in the meeting. I actually should have said I listened to the Bernsteins is more accurate. So I don't know if I can make that change if it's not what I actually said.
Lisa, could you note that? And, okay.
Yes.
And I have no changes or corrections to the minutes. So do we have any public comments on the minutes?
No raised hands.
Okay. With that, we'll close the public comment on the minutes. And may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the June 3rd, 2021, the June 12th, 2021, and the July 12th, 2021 City Council meetings?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Schwang, seconded by Councilmember Cole. Lisa, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Schwang,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
May,
Yes.
Krolik,
Yes.
Boris.
Yes, minutes are approved as read with the one addition is added by Vice Mayor Krolik.
Thank you.
We're now moving to the public comment number 1. We have 2 public comment sections at every meeting. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the city council on any matter not on the agenda. As a reminder, members of the public may provide public comments via the Zoom platform by using the raise hand feature or calling in by phone by pressing *9 on the telephone keypad. If a member of the public wants to provide public comment, they shall request to speak by using the raise hand feature prior to the close of the public comment period. In response, the town will unmute the speaker and allow them to speak for up to 3 minutes. If there appears to be a large number of speakers, speaking time may reduce to no less than 2 minutes. Members of the public are limited to 1 comment at this time. State law prohibits the council from discussing or acting on any non-agenda items and generally limits the ability of the council to respond to any public comments made regarding non-agenda items. With that, I will now open public comment. Lisa, do we have any raised hands?
Mayor, I don't see any raised hands.
Okay. With that, we'll now close public comment then and move to the next item on the agenda, which is announcement of conflicts of interest. This portion of the meeting is for council members to disclose any conflict of interest related to any item on the agenda. Any council member who has confirmed a conflict of interest or has reason to believe they have a conflict of interest should disclose the conflict for the record and abide by the disqualification requirements contained in the FPPC regulations. Let me see if there's any council members that have any conflict of interest. Do I see any hands raised? I'm looking at the pictures here.
No raised hands.
Okay, I see none. So without objection, we'll note that there are no conflict of interest that have been reported. So with that, we'll move into the consent calendar. We have 3 items tonight. The consent calendar includes routine items which generally do not require a discussion. A council member may remove an item for discussion, and any member of the public may request a council member to remove an item for discussion. If not removed, the items are approved in one motion with a roll call vote. The titles of the consent calendar items are as follows. Number 1, monthly claims, July 1 through July 31st, 2021. Number 2, a resolution adopting the Town of Hillsborough value statements. And number 3, a resolution approving and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with Rene Public Law Group LLP, doing business as Rene Public Policy Group, RPPG, for legislative advocacy services for FY 2021 and 2022. I will now ask my colleagues individually if there are any items they would like to have removed from the consent calendar. Councilmember Schwang, would you like to remove an item?
No.
Councilmember Cole?
No.
Councilmember May?
No.
Vice Mayor Krolik?
No.
And I have none to remove. So are there any public requests for any of these, any one of these 3 items to be removed for separate discussion? Lisa, do we have any raised hands?
No raised hands.
Okay, with that, we'll close the public comment request. And may I have a motion to approve the consent calendar items 1 through 3?
So moved.
So moved by Vice Mayor Krolik. Does the motion have a second?
Second,
Second by Councilmember Schwang. Lisa, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Schwang,
yes.
Cole,
yes,
May,
Yes.
Krolik,
Yes.
Royce.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll get to the public hearing portion of the meeting. We have 2 items tonight under public hearing. Item 4, which is titled Resolution Adopting the Town of Hillsborough's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. And this will be presented by Consultant Senior Analyst Ed Cooney and Attorney Sarah Foley. So Ed and Sarah, welcome. And the floor is yours, as they say.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Ed.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Honorable Vice Mayor, City Council members. We have public hearings on the agenda today. One for the Urban Water Management Plan, one for the Water Shortage Contingency Plan. It's important to note that the Water Shortage Contingency Plan is a component of the Urban Water Management Plan. It is Chapter 8 and Attachment M to the Urban Water Management Plan, but it is a standalone planning document and therefore requires its own public hearing. Next slide, please. So urban water management plans are required by water suppliers with 3,000 or more water service connections. Hillsborough has about 4,200 connections. Urban water management plans are updated every 5 years, and agencies follow what is called the Urban Water Management Plan Guidebook provided by the Department of Water Resources during the update process. As part of the urban water management.
Excuse me, Ed.
Yes.
I think your voice goes in and out, and I'm not sure if it's just on my end.
So we're having problems hearing my voice, is that correct?
I can
Right,
hear it
sort of.
now, but I think you're backing up a little bit at times.
Okay, let me pull the screen closer. And let's see if that's better. Can anyone hear me better?
We can. We can.
Great.
Thank
If there's any problems, please let me know and I will put earbuds in.
Thank you.
You bet. So agencies are required to hold a duly noticed public hearing to adopt the urban water management plan. Once the plan is adopted by the governing body, it must be submitted to the Department of Water Resources, to the county, to other interested public agencies, and must be publicly posted. Next slide, please. What is in an urban water management plan? The plan is divided into 10 chapters. This slide presents all 10 chapters. We'll not be covering every chapter today. We'll be focusing on the important elements of the urban water management plan as it pertains to Hillsborough. Next slide. The first of which is Hillsborough's normal water supply and water demand. And what do we mean by normal? Normal is when the town or the regional water system or the state of California is not in any water supply shortage scenario. So as you can see in the chart to the right, Hillsborough has what's called an individual supply guarantee. That's how much water is available to it by the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission during normal years, which is about 2 million units or 100 cubic feet. 1 cubic foot is, 100 cubic feet is equivalent to 748 gallons. So 2 million units of water available to the town during normal years. The blue line, the solid blue line, is Hillsborough's historical water use. As you can see, up until about 2013, it averaged in the neighborhood of 1.75 million units of water per year. The drastic drop that you see in that water usage or water demand is related to the most recent, prior to the current drought, which began in 2013 and ended in or around 2016. Hillsborough's water hit a low of about 1 million units of water per year until it began to rebound to the present usage level of about 1.3 million units. The dotted line to the right is projected demand. projected demand. It's projected to increase through 2031. That's related to the regional housing needs allocation, RENA 6. And that increase is expected to level off in 2031. But as you can see, projected water demand is well below Hillsborough's supply guarantee. And Hillsborough has enough water to handle demand during normal years. Next slide, please. Another important element of the town's urban water management plan is its urban water use targets. These targets were set up or required as part of the Water Conservation Act of 2009. The goal of these water use targets and that act were to reduce the state's water use by 20% by the year 2020. These targets began in 2010. Hillsborough addressed them in their 2010 Urban Water Management Plan. Hillsborough uses what's called Method 1 to establish its urban water use target. The good news is in 2020, Hillsborough is in compliance with its water use targets. In the table that you see in the slide, to the left is Hillsborough's, bottom left is Hillsborough's 2020 actual water use in gallons per capita per day, about 234 gallons per capita per day in 2020. Hillsborough's required target had to at least fall below 267 gallons per capita per day. So a lot of room there, well below the urban water use targets. Next slide, please. So Chapter 7 of the town's urban water management plan deals with dry year supply as compared to demand. As we've discussed in prior meetings, Hillsborough's projected water supply as provided by the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, based on what is called the With Bay Delta Plan scenario, or the implementation of the Bay Delta Plan amendment, presents water shortage scenarios of anywhere from 44 to 54%, depending on when the projected supply shortage were to occur in 5-year steps from 2025 through 2045. Next slide. It's important to note that there's quite a lot of uncertainty surrounded San Francisco Public Utilities Commission's dry year supply projections as provided to BOSCA and the town. Just calling out a few of those uncertainties are numerous lawsuits filed at the state and federal court levels, the fact that the Bay Delta Plan is not self-implementing, and the implementation of it would likely result in more lawsuits, and perhaps most importantly, the fact that the Newsom administration is actively negotiating on a voluntary agreement between stakeholders to find a middle path between the with Bay Delta Plan amendment and kind of the status quo without Bay Delta Plan amendment scenarios. So the reason this is being called out is any readers of the Urban Water Management Plan are urged to contact the town or the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission regarding up-to-date water supply information related to the scenarios presented in this Urban Water Management Plan. It's a fairly changeable landscape. Next slide, please. Chapter 9 of the Water Management Plan relates to demand management measures, another way of saying water conservation programs. Hillsborough has active water conservation programs. We've listed well over a dozen of the regional conservation programs that are provided on this slide. The town on its own implements demand management measures such as public outreach, its automated metering infrastructure system, which is its smart meter system, and most importantly, its water smart system, which does a number of things for the residents, which includes providing hourly use, access to hourly use, leak alert, active high bill alerts, a very powerful tool to help Hillsborough residents be their own water managers. And Hillsborough also manages its own operations to be water conserving, which helps to keep water use down. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we've had 2 public meetings. Today is the public hearing. It was a duly noticed public hearing, and that does conclude my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Sarah, did you have anything you'd like to add? Sarah, by the way, is our legal representation from BBK and is an expert on this matter, as is Ed. So.
I would just like to add that I believe that town staff has done an excellent job on preparing the urban water management plan, as well as the water shortage contingency plan that we'll also be discussing. I think it's legally sufficient. It complies with the water code and DWR's guidance in their 2020 guidebook. It is a good planning document. We have to incorporate the information from our wholesale supplier, which is SFPUC. It's kind of some worst case scenario projections, but again, as Ed mentioned, they're uncertain. And we're doing the best with the information that was provided to us, and the document that the town has provided does a good job and is legally sufficient.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that. With that, let's go to the council and see if they have any questions with respect to the presentation. Councilmember Schwang, did you have any questions regarding what Ed or Sarah presented?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ed, for the presentation. It's very helpful. One of the things that I was questioning is that on page 47 listed the programs, and I think that is in one of your slide deck, you also presented the many programs that's through BOSCA, regional water conservation programs. Which one are the allocation is the town's contribution to the program? And the second question is that, does the town administer some of the programs, or is BOSCA the designated entity, such as the Long Be Gone program? Is it something that they would then, residents then would apply directly to BOSCA?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. So the dollar amounts presented in that graph are the cost to the town and those are estimated costs, obviously, for implementing those programs, depending on levels of participation, but that's what was budgeted. The second part of your question related to who administers the program, it's a partnership between BOSCA and the town. So the BOSCA manages or administers the program, and that's, for example, regional contracts, so that, for example, not every agency has to go out to bid for the services provided in the program. The town manages its own customers, sort of day-to-day participation, answers questions, et cetera, that perhaps BOSCA can't answer. And did I answer both of your questions fully?
So if residents are interested in any of those programs, they should reach out to our finance departments?
They initially are encouraged to reach out to BOSCA for the BOSCA
Okay.
programs. And BOSCA's website provides quite a lot of information. But of course, at any time, if a resident has more questions, isn't getting the help they need, they can always call the Public Works Department or the town's main line, and we'll get them the information they need. And we often field those kinds of calls.
So as far as the latest program, it would be directed to the BOSCA website for the latest update and the latest programs available.
That is correct for that initial information. But we are always here to help our customers find the way through these programs.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
my second question is, I know drought is on everybody's mind, and it's really wonderful to hear your presentation on the numbers that the town is facing. It's really positive in terms of meeting the requirements and looking ahead in terms of the potential shortage. Are there discussions regarding capturing the rainfall and then recycling the water? Has there been discussion that the town is working with our water, such as Cemetel or the other, the water management recycle programs?
Yes, so the town participates in a number of programs regionally that are designed to make the best use of runoff and rainwater. So from as small as the Rain Barrel program that's available through BOSCA to regional sort of what we call recharge groundwater recharge programs. The town, as a BOSCA member agency, is a benefactor of those recharge programs. So the answer is yes, the town does
Actively
yes,
participate with
that's correct.
partner agencies on the water resources.
Yes, correct.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Schwan. Councilmember Cole?
Yes, thank you, Ed. Just to follow up on some of the questions Councilmember Chuang was commenting on, with regards to our site, our website, our town website, which is where most of our residents look to find information, and water conservation and drought is critical. It's basically on everyone's mind right now. Are any of these programs listed, or is there a link that residents can access to the website and get more information with regards to the programs that are listed here on page 47?
Yes, thank you. That is available on our website, and additionally, BOSCA links to the town website, and I'm happy to provide those links to the city council through the mayor and the city clerk after this meeting, if desired.
I think the question then, are they on the website? So I residents can
correct.
quickly go to them. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Councilmember May, any
I
questions?
have no question. Thanks, Ed, for all the work you do.
Vice Mayor Krolik?
Just quickly, just to build on what Marie and Sophie were talking about, I actually just went to the town's website and clicked on the Lawn Be Gone program. And it does take us to a BOSCA flyer that says that it expired in June 2017. So we might want to update that.
I will certainly take care of that.
Yeah, if it's still in effect.
Yeah,
But you think it still is in effect, Ed?
We just renewed. In fact, in June, we just renewed. So that does need to be updated.
All right, great. Thank
Thank
you
you for
very much.
catching that.
Great
I appreciate that.
presentation and great. I don't want to take away from all the hard work that went into this water plan. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question, and we sort of alluded to it at the July discussion over this, and that is the difference between the dry year and the normal year. And I think you're going to get to it when we talk about item number 5 on drought. But could you articulate just for the general public, we have a guarantee that's applicable during the normal year, but that guarantee is not applicable during a dry year. So if I understand correctly, could you help explain what that means and when we kick into the dry year?
Yes, that's correct. So we, during non-water shortage emergencies, we operate under normal conditions in which the individual supply guarantee applies. If and when either the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, who supplies 100% of our water, declares a water shortage emergency. Or as we found in the last drought, if the state declares a water shortage emergency, then the supply begins to be governed by agreements. They're called Tier 1 and Tier 2 water supply agreements, which through formulas determine how much water supply is available based on conditions, on both the water supply conditions and drought conditions. And then ultimately San Francisco and BOSCA notifies public member agencies, for example, the town of Hillsborough, how much water is available to them through the SFPUC system. Basically, which part of the remaining water, which part of the pie is available to the town. So that is why the individual supply guarantee is not, it's not that it's not in effect, it's just superseded by the Tier 1 and Tier 2 agreements and the water supply available to the town therein. Did that answer your question?
It did, and I just wanted, so if you look at a number of moving variables when we put a water plan together, one is whether or not this Delta plan is approved or not approved, or whatever kind of agreement is reached with that, because that could have dramatic effect on the amount of water available to the town of Hillsborough. And then secondly is whether the state or the agency declares there's a water emergency, which again affects our water supply. So while the numbers look great in a normal year, in a water emergency year, which we may be going into, it could be quite different. And that's why we have all the concern over water prevention measures. Did I state that correctly, Ed?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, that's really my question here. I would applaud the effort and time it takes to put these plans together. As you alluded, we do this every 5 years, state requirement designed to assure the state that every agency in the state has considered their water supply and what happens if there's any kind of emergencies. And that's what this is designed to do. So it takes a lot of time and effort, and I want to thank you all for doing it. This will be filed with the state before the end of the month. Is that correct?
That is correct, within 30 days.
Within 30 days, okay. I have no further questions. Assuming there's none from the council, let's go to public comment. Do I see any from the council? I do not see any hands raised. So let's open the public hearing and see if there's any public comments on this particular item, agenda item number 4, the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. Lisa, could you let me know if there's any hands raised?
No raised hands, Mayor.
Okay. With that, I will close the public hearing and move it back to the council if there's any further questions or comments. Councilmember Schwang, do you have any follow-up questions or comments?
None?
Councilmember Cole?
None.
Councilmember May?
None.
Vice Mayor Krolik?
None.
And I have none. So with that, may I have a motion to adopt the resolution adopting, I'm sorry.
Through the mayor and through the
Yes,
city council, just two items of business, I apologize.
yes,
Was Vice Mayor Krolik did submit some recommended cleanup language
okay,
in face of the urban water management plan. I don't know whether that needs to be addressed now. And the town did receive one written comment on the urban water management plan from the California Pool and Spa Association through Councilmember Chuang, I believe. That may also need to be addressed before we.
could we enter that? Let's take the comment from the water conservation, the state that Councilmember Schwang presented. Could you enter that into the record, and could you share with us what the gist of it is and any actions needed regarding it?
I cannot provide it on the screen, but it was presented to the city clerk in writing, and I'm happy to read the changes if that is desired.
Lisa, do you have it there? I don't know.
No.
I've not seen it. I'm not sure if it was sent to council beforehand.
It may have been missed. It was at the last minute. I can certainly forward it again, but I can read it out loud if need be.
Could you please?
So this is an edit to the preface of the Urban Water Management Plan, page 14, beginning on the second sentence, should read, would you like me to read? What
Ed, is this the change that I submitted with Paul?
that is
Yeah,
correct.
it doesn't have anything to do with the resolution. It was just, there were some incomplete sentences on page 45 that I pointed out to Paul. But I think I don't think it really changes your presentation.
Perfect.
Yeah, and it's not any wording in the resolution itself.
Okay, so it has no bearing on the resolution.
Correct.
Just the plan itself.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
that's fine.
okay. And is that the same thing Councilmember Schwong referred to? Are we talking the same thing here?
No, I believe that Ed, you are mentioning that the email that I forwarded to Paul, and it is addressed to the council, and it is from the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance and the California Pool and Spot Association. And what they're asking is to ask the council to reconsider the prohibitions of the initial filing of new swimming pools as outlined in the 2020 Water Shortage Contingency Plan.
And through the mayor, that might be.
Could I
sorry,
ask
Mr. Mayor.
Paul? Paul, could you speak to that? I see your
Yeah.
hand raised.
Thank you, sir. And that might be something we can include in the minutes in the next items. As Ed mentioned, this has to be read as a public hearing separately. But it specifically has to deal with the construction and filling of new pools if the state declares a tier 4 or tier 4 emergency, where the precedent has to be given for the use of potable water for drinking water and for public services. Or so there's a differentiation that has to be made, and a declaration that needs to be made. The council can opt to do so, but I think for the purpose of that particular item, it will be read in this continuation, this next part.
And in item number 5, Paul?
That's correct.
So, okay. So
And
it doesn't affect item number 4, the plan itself?
I don't believe so. And so it's just a clarification item. And then the city clerk has the corrections that were provided by Vice Mayor Krolik, and that could be corrected into the minutes and into the resolution.
Okay. Assuming there's no objection to that, we'll then take that item in the next agenda item. And the motion here will be to adopt the resolution with the cleanup language proposed by Vice Mayor Krolik, adopting the Town of Hillsboro's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, and to direct Public Works to submit the town's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan with the corrected edits to the California Department of Water Resources within 30 days of adoption, as well as to all other entities as required in the California Water Code. Is there a motion to that effect?
So, Mr. Mayor, I just want to point out that the cleanup language is not part of the reso. It's just part of the staff report.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood you.
Yeah.
So strike the cleanup language from the resolution. So resolution is read without the additions with cleanup language.
Correct.
Sorry. Is there a motion in that effect?
So moved.
So
Second,
moved by Councilmember Cole. Is there a second?
second.
Second by Councilmember Schwan. Does everybody understand the motion? It is read in the, is listed in the material presented to you. Lisa, could you please take a roll call vote on it, please?
Schwang,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
May,
Yes.
Krolik,
Yes.
Royce.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Okay. With that, we'll move to item 5, and that's titled Resolution Adopting the Town of Hillsboro's 2020 Water Shortage Contingency Plan. And this will be presented by consultant senior analyst Ed Cooney and attorney Sarah Foley. So, and then Paul, if you want to comment again on the edits that we received, or the language, the letter we received. With that, Ed, the floor is yours.
Thank you again. The next slide, please. So as stated previously, the water shortage contingency plan is chapter 8 of the urban water management plan. It is a standalone document, also attached as appendix M to the urban water management plan. Because it is a standalone document, much of the information provided in the water shortage contingency plan mirrors information provided in the urban water management plan. Things like water system description, water supply, water demand, dry year supply shortages, scenarios, etc. However, there are 3 important elements to the water shortage contingency plan that we discuss. The first is the supply shortage stages in section 3 of the urban water management plan, presented as table 3.1 or 3-1. There are 6 shortage stages, which we'll show you in the next slide. The next are the demand reduction actions associated with each stage. So there are numerous actions planned per water shortage reduction stage. And we'll give you a preview of that in the next slide as well. Lastly, attachment A to the water shortage contingency plan, the historical drought response document, is a very important planning document because it captures Hillsborough's response to previous drought emergency events, including our most recent and most severe drought emergency event where the town had to reduce its water use by at least 36%. So for all intents and purposes, the Hillsborough has a lot of experience in implementing its water shortage contingency plan and has enacted a number of the actions related to the stages provided therein. Next slide. So this is a slide to summarize the water shortage levels, the percent of water shortage related to the level, and it also provides some example demand reduction actions per each stage. So a shortage level of 0 is basically normal conditions. So during normal conditions, the town is always implementing water conservation programs, basic water waste prohibitions like no excessive runoff from a property, those types of programs. As drought conditions worsen, the town increases its response by stages. Stage 1, up to a 10% required cutback. Stage 2, 20%, et cetera. 10% steps all the way to a stage 6, which is considered a catastrophic supply shortage greater than 50%. Typically, that's a severe shortage or a natural disaster such as an earthquake. The actions related to each stage are cumulative. So for example, are designed to be cumulative. So for example, any actions implemented during stage 1 would continue to exist through stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. So it's a cumulative response action plan. It's important to note that City Council has control over what stage the town observes, what shortage level the town observes, and what demand reduction actions it ultimately implements. This is a plan, a guide, but City Council always maintains control of what is actually enacted and implemented. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we've had 2 public meetings on the water shortage contingency plan, and this is a public hearing. It was a duly noticed public hearing consistent with the California Water Code and the California Government Code. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer questions.
Thank you, Ed. Sarah, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I would just like to add that water shortage contingency planning, as Ed mentioned, has always been something that the town has done, and it's always been an element of urban water management plans. But in response to the last drought, the legislature amended the Urban Water Management Planning Act to require a specific water shortage contingency plan with prescribed elements such as the 6 standard stages that Ed mentioned, just to kind of standardize these stages throughout the state and to provide a more concrete planning document that can be modified outside of the 5-year urban water management plan cycle, to be, again, a proactive planning document rather than a reactive, what do we do when there's a drought or a water shortage emergency? And again, it is consistent with the California Water Code, legally sufficient.
Thank you, Sarah. Just make sure I'm clear. Is this submitted to the state as a standalone document as well?
Yes, it
That is
is.
correct.
It is. Okay, thank you. With that, let's see if there's any questions or comments. Paul, we're going to hold your comment because I think that's public input, the letter that came from the Pool and Spa Association. So we'll read that during the public comment. So with that, we'll go to Councilmember Schwang.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate your comments and presentation. So just back to the shortage level, Ed, you mentioned that the council will have the authority to move forward with the shortage level. Is that going to be provided to us from the staff regarding or is it going to be coming from the state in terms of the level of shortage? And then as far as the myriad of demands or inputs that we can instill, it is all listed in the program on page 54, or are there additional ones that will be listed or provided?
I'll answer your second question first. The table 3.2 in the water shortage contingency plan is intended to be a comprehensive list of potential actions. But City Council, in fact, I believe there's within those other prohibitions as required, I think is what's listed. So the City Council can always choose to enact any action deemed necessary to meet so that demand meets supply. So City Council maintains that ability and that control as well. This is really just a guidebook to assist City Council and decision makers. Regarding your first question, typically the way it works and how it worked during the last drought is staff did its utmost to inform City Council of conditions and where demand versus supply lied, given the current situation, and then potential recommendations for which actions to implement to bridge the gap, to bring demand closer to supply or in alignment with supply. So one would expect in the future that is how it would unfold. Staff would make recommendations to City Council. City Council would deliberate them and agree, add to, subtract from those recommendations.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Cole.
Yes, along those lines, I would just like some clarifications. Are we talking about what the supplier will declare they can actually provide, or what the state is mandating in terms of shortage? Going back to the same table with regards to percent shortage range and the shortage level, is this based on what the supplier is telling us will be available to us, or is it based on what the state is declaring? It's not very clear to me.
That's a great question. And that is because it's unclear, because really those are two separate scenarios. The typical scenario prior to the last drought was our water supplier would declare a water shortage emergency. That's the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. And two Hillsborough and Bosque member agencies state a cutback requirement, 20%. During the last drought, the state declared a water emergency that preempted the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission's declaration of a water shortage emergency and cutback requirements. The San Francisco Public Utilities Commission deferred to the state. So by de facto, the town had to consider the state's required cutback levels. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, so basically, the guidance will be coming from the states is what it sounds like in the long run.
Or San Francisco Public Utilities Commission if the state does not preempt them.
Mhm.
Comes from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission because they do manage the regional water system.
Right. Thanks, Ed.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember May,
No questions.
Vice Mayor Krolik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think most of our residents would probably be surprised that our gallons per capita per day is over 200. How do we measure up to the rest of the state in that kind of usage? Do you know? And do you think there would be any restrictions that wouldn't come down as a percentage, but might come down as a per capita usage in the future?
So I'll answer your first question first. The town's water usage as compared to similar communities is reasonable. Hillsborough is somewhat unique in that it is a nearly 100% residential community with large developed landscaped parcels compared to agencies and communities with similar development. The town's water usage is well in line with. Now, if one compares the town's usage to an agency or community that has a different development footprint, lots of multifamily, no landscaping, then the town's water usage gallon per capita per day does appear high, but it is a bit of comparing apples to oranges in that case. Regarding your second question on how the state, or would the state use a gallons per capita per day versus a percent cutback requirement to prescribe water agencies or to require water agencies like Hillsborough to meet some goal. I can't say that I know the answer to that. I do know that typically regulators of percent cutback against historical because various reasons. During the last drought, they did use a gallon per capita per day threshold.
They did. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Ed.
You're welcome.
Thank
Appreciate
you. Ed, your last comment, typically is not Hillsborough viewed as a high water user because of our large lots in residential, such that during the last drought, we had the highest water shortage requirement, the 36% reduction, which we did an outstanding job and actually achieved close to 41%. So is it not expected? I'm not trying, I'm just asking that if we had another water shortage plan and there was one size fit all, that we would probably get hit harder than most towns. Is that a fair statement?
So you are correct. If the state were to use the methodology it used during the last drought to determine what tier Hillsborough would fall into, you are correct. It would fall into the highest cutback tier. I don't know that we know what approach the state would take during another drought emergency. During the end of the last drought, they were deferring a bit more to the regional water suppliers on how cutbacks were achieved. So I think I hate to try to read the tea leaves on that, but you are correct. As compared to water agencies overall, Hillsborough's usage gallon per capita per day does appear to be high, again, because of the nature of how the town is developed, large state lots.
So it does behoove us to try to lobby or argue or advocate against a one size fit all philosophy and look to the nature of a town. And number two, is a backstop plan to make sure that we try to adopt actions that will minimize our external water usage through the plants we approve, et cetera, right, during our landscape requirements. Is that?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Conclusion? Okay. I have no further questions on that. And assuming council has no follow-up questions, let's go to public comment. And public comment, Paul, I would like you to summarize the letter we received with respect to public comment that Councilmember Strong referred to.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to. So the California Pool and Spa Association did submit a letter to the city council and to you, the mayor, requesting that you reconsider restrictions against the filling of new pools. So the restriction is written under the shortage level 4 when the town gets into a 40% reduction. And the way that the restriction is actually written right now, the goal when we get into a 40% reduction is to require, the town is actually obligated to require that and ensure sufficient supplies for human consumption, sanitation, and fire prevention. So that is written into the guidelines. So this California Pool and Spa Association specifically is asking that you not add this language in there because the trigger is to restrict the filling of new pools. And the reason why they don't want to restrict it is because they feel that, just summarizing their letter, that it does impact their industry, construction trades, and some of their construction industries and local jobs by doing that. As Mr. Cooney mentioned, we did have experience with this during the last drought. There were, for example, conditions of approval that were written by the ADRB for new homes that had to be built. What we did is we specifically didn't say they couldn't do them. We did hold them back. We did permit those projects. They just had to be delayed until the drought was over. So we understand that there was a momentary impact as a result of that. But at that point, the town did have to choose, do we want to impact potable water for indoor safety and indoor needs versus new construction? And that was the choice, the tough choice we had to make to meet a 40% reduction.
Thank you, Paul, and we'll reserve comments for after the public comment is finished, but thank you for reading that into the record. Lisa, are there other hands raised for other public comments?
Mayor, I don't have any raised hands.
Okay. With that, we'll close the public comment and bring it back to council for follow-up questions or comments and any feedback they would have on the one public comment we did receive. Councilmember Schwong, any comments before we take it to motion?
No further comments.
Councilmember Cole,
No further comments.
Councilmember May,
No comments.
Vice Mayor Krolik.
I would just would like to recommend to the California Pool and Spa Association that they perhaps work with maybe San Mateo County on a water truck that would move water from pools that are undergoing renovation to pools that need refilling. Because right now that water, if your pool needs renovation, that all just goes right out through the wastewater treatment plant.
It's a great idea. And as a person that has been considering redoing my pool, although I'm deferring it because of concerns over a drought, that might alleviate my conscience if we had some plan like that in place. So great suggestion. I only have one question, Paul, with respect to the public comment. Again, the action, Ed, you said the action items under each of these categories, these are suggested action items, but as we implement them, the council has an opportunity to consider them again before they're actually acted upon. Is that correct? Or once we approve this, are they automatically put in place?
They remain within the control of city council to determine whether to implement them or not implement them during a water emergency event.
So if we went to level 4, we have the option to review those and change if we so desire. So if
That is
that
correct.
became a factor. Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. Seeing any hands raised from council, I don't see any. Let's take it to motion to adopt the resolution adopting the town of Hillsboro's 2020 water shortage contingency plan and to direct Public Works to submit the town's 2020 water shortage contingency plan as part of its 2020 urban water management plan to the California Department of Water Resources within 30 days of adoption, as well as to all other entities required under the California Water Code. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
So moved by Councilmember May. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Schwan. It's been moved and seconded. Lisa, may I have a roll call vote?
Chuang,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
May,
Yes.
Krolik,
Yes.
Royce.
Yes. Motion carries 5-0. With that, we'll move to old business. We have one item under old business. Agenda item 6, introduction of an ordinance repealing chapter 8.10 of the Hillsborough Municipal Code and adopting a new chapter 8.10 by adopting by reference chapter 4.017 of Title 4 of the San Mateo County Code of Ordinances entitled Regulating the Use of Disposable Food Serviceware and set the public record hearing date of September 13th, 2021 for adoption of the ordinance and resolution approving and authorizing the city manager to execute a memorandum of understanding between San Mateo County and the town of Hillsborough and authorizing San Mateo County to provide education and enforcement efforts for the disposable food service ordinance within the town of Hillsborough. It will be presented by Senior Management Analyst Mandy Brown.
Thank
Mandy?
you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council. Apologies for the mouthful. I know it's a long name, it takes up a little paragraph. This is the item that we spoke about last month, working with the County of San Mateo. And there's just a little bit of clarification that I need to add, which is why the item title is so long. So I'll explain that as we go through. Just to revisit what the ordinance is, the County of San Mateo Office of Sustainability has done a great job at crafting a model ordinance for cities within the county to adopt that makes it consistent to not allow plastics or styrofoam disposable food serviceware. Instead, looks for wood, paper products that will actually break down. It affects private schools for the town of Hillsborough, as well as caterers and the Burlingame Country Club. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, all of those organizations are already in compliance or expect to be in compliance with the ordinance specifications by the end of the year. Just to revisit all of the different cities within the county that have already adopted this ordinance, it's quite a few. And even actually since our last meeting, Colma has adopted an ordinance as well.
We have it. I prefer it.
So this is just an explanation on why the item title is so long and why it's a little quirky. So when I went back and looked in our code to look at where we could put this new language. I did come across chapter 8.10, which is an old ordinance from 1990 that prohibits chlorofluorocarbon processed food packaging, which is essentially styrofoam, based on my general understanding of what that means. And it looks more like something that was a general ordinance that was adopted by various municipalities. When I looked at what Burlingame's process for adopting this disposable food service ordinance from the county, they had this almost virtually the same language for our existing 8.10, and they're doing what I'm proposing we do tonight, which is taking that language out and replacing it with the new county ordinance. So it's really just taking out this duplicative language and then having this replace it. The old ordinance had the enforcement inspection done by the city engineer. So that would mean Paul would be making sure that everybody was not using styrofoam. Instead, with the county ordinance, it's the County Office of Sustainability. And that's part of the MOU that was also part of the staff report that you guys have. So basically, in a nutshell, the new ordinance takes the enforcement load off of the town. And it also is broader, encompassing more plastics than just styrofoam. And so here I've just put the language from the staff report, the long paragraph that was already read, number one, and then the MOU that basically just approves and authorizes the city manager to execute that partnership with the county in moving forward. And Yoon Soo Lim is here this evening from the County of San Mateo Office of Sustainability. So she has been working with all of those cities that you saw listed on that previous slide, as well as others that have been considering it. She's just been a real resource for the town, and we appreciate her being here. So if you have any questions specific on the ordinance that you were unable to ask last time, she's here to field those questions. And if you have any other questions for me, now's the time. So thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. And I'm sorry, I didn't hear who was here with us this evening.
Yoon Soo Lim, she's from the
Oh,
County
yes.
Office of
Okay.
Sustainability.
Gotcha. Welcome, Lou. Okay, let's see if we have any questions or comments by any of the council members regarding this. Councilmember Schwan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mandy, for your presentation. And I know that last month we've gone through a very thorough detail to the process of this ordinance. My question is this: under the analysis on page 62, there are 4 entities in town that has been identified as being impacted by this ordinance in particular. And I was just wondering, does it apply to catering services that are be part of the fundraising events in town, or food trucks for that matters? And if it does, how are these vendors getting information as to the requirements?
Yes, yes. So the jurisdictions, it's really about them being sort of a physical place. There are exemptions about events that are happening for multiple days. And I'm going to ask Yoon Soo to unmute so she can correct me if I'm overstating anything. But the food trucks generally have a health permit, I think either within the county or the jurisdiction where they're located. And so that the county would be doing a lot of that education. That being said, we'll be working together with the county, and we're actually setting up meetings in the next couple of weeks to talk about how to partner with them on education, and so that we can help amplify what is in this ordinance and what it means for the cities that have adopted it.
So for the organizer of the fundraising events that happen in towns, one would assume that the catering services would then have the opportunity through the county or the Office of Sustainability to get the requirements that they need to be in compliance?
Correct. I don't think if it's a specific event or a one-off fundraising event, it necessarily applies. It would need to be extending, I believe, for a few days and have a certain number of attendees. But I see Yoon Soo is unmuted, so she's either nodding or shaking her head. She can correct me, make sure I said that correctly.
Hi, everybody. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Mandy. Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Yoon Soo Lim, and I'm Senior Sustainability Specialist with the County of San Mateo's Office of Sustainability. And I've been leading the county's effort from the beginning in the write-up, the stakeholder outreach, and the adoption of the ordinance. And currently, I'm heading the implementation of the ordinance within the jurisdictions that adopted the county's ordinance, and supporting our other partner cities like the town of Hillsborough, who are interested in exploring it for their jurisdictions. And thank you. I've been working closely with Mandy, as she mentioned, for some time around this effort. And thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this important discussion this evening. And to answer your question, if you really want me to dive into the details a little bit, I can. Specifically to the fundraising question, it depends on the nature of the fundraising. So if a nonprofit association, for instance, if has a fundraising event that doesn't occur more than 3 days in any 90-day period during that year, and it's not open to the general public and it's only really open to its members, then it's not, they do not have to comply with the ordinance. And so where is this really detailed definition coming from? is really based off of what's in the California Retail Food Code, which is what we're basing our definition of a food facility. And so in the California Retail Food Code, it really defines and divvies up what the state is considering a food facility. And our ordinance is basing our requirements on food facilities using the California Retail Food Code. So I hope that answered your question, and let me know if you need any additional information around that piece. And as for reaching out to all the impacted food facilities, so the county, we will be doing that as part of our outreach, as part of our leading the effort around outreach as well as education within jurisdictions that adopt the county's ordinance. And that includes a number of combination of different methods, including mailers. We hired a consultant who is going to be literally picking up the phone and calling each food facility and letting them know about the ordinance and asking questions. There's also one-on-one site visits if that's necessary. We're also going to be doing emails. We have a hotline that's available. We have an email dedicated solely for this Foodware Aware program, which we launched within the last few months. So a lot of different ways for impacted food facilities to reach out to the county's Foodware Aware team, as well as the city and the towns, in which case the city and the town staff, can kick it over to the county for us to kind of take over and manage the outreach and education efforts for the specific food facility.
Well, thank you. I think that the bottom line is when in doubt, call the hotline, right? To get the information.
Absolutely. We have a dedicated Foodware Aware team that's composed of Office of Sustainability staff, including me, a few of my colleagues, as well as a consultant team that has been hired for several years now to help lead this effort.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Cole.
Thank you, Mandy and Yusuf. I don't have any additional questions. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember May.
I don't have any questions.
Vice Mayor Krolik.
Thank you. Welcome, Unsu. And just to clarify, it looks like there's no plastic, even the plastic that's marketed as compostable. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct. We are trying to get away from regular traditional plastic that's petroleum-based, made from petroleum, as well as what the quote unquote greener, more alternative, greener alternative called compostable plastics. Some people call it bioplastics. Some people call it PLA. There are a number of different names. We're really trying to get away from all plastics in general, and because it does get really confusing. And a lot of people, for instance, they have a really hard time distinguishing compostable plastics from regular traditional plastics. And that's been causing a lot of issues.
I could see that at the transfer station. Yeah. And then just one other quick question. Are the aluminum containers with the cardboard tops, are they permitted or just compostable?
That's a great question. Aluminum containers with the cardboard tops, that is allowed because aluminum has been, for many years, been something that our community has been pretty knowledgeable in terms of knowing that it can be recycled and sorted properly. And they tend to be very cost effective. So we are allowing items that are made from aluminum.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Yusuf, again, welcome. I'm sorry I didn't recognize you earlier and give you a chance to say a few words. So thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Just to make sure I'm clear on and I'm totally in support of this. I just want to make sure I understand the enforcement mechanisms, even though we have limited probably applicability in Hillsborough. But there are no criminal penalties associated with this. This is all administrative penalties if there's a violation.
That is correct.
Okay, because normally I'd be concerned about allowing an outside agency to administer criminal penalties in the town's jurisdiction, but it seems to be a relatively minor problem, and as you said, it doesn't apply anyway. And I was struck with the ordinance and some of the details over the amount of harm that these plastics can do, even though they're relatively sort of taken for granted sometimes. So I applaud the county for moving forward on this. I have no further questions. And with that, we'll move it to public comment. I will open public comment. And Lisa, do we have any hands raised?
No raised hands, Mayor.
Okay. Give it a minute. Hearing none, I will now close public comment and come back to the council for any further questions or comments. Councilmember Chuang, any follow-up questions or comments?
No comments.
Councilmember Cole?
None.
Councilmember May?
None.
Vice Mayor Krolik?
None.
And I have none. So with that, may I have a motion? Mandy, excuse me, I'm probably going to butcher these words again, but may I have a motion to introduce the ordinance entitled Ordinance of the City Council of the Town of Hillsborough regarding repealing Chapter 8.10 of the Hillsborough Muni Code and adopting a new Chapter 8.10 by adopting by reference Chapter 4.107 of Title 4 of the San Mateo County Code of Ordinances entitled Regulating the Use of Disposable Food Serviceware, and set the public hearing dates of September 13th, 2021 for adoption of the ordinance, and to adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the city manager to execute a memorandum of understanding between the San Mateo County and the town of Hillsborough, and authorizing San Mateo County to provide education and enforcement efforts for the disposable food service ordinance in the town of Hillsborough. Do we have a motion to that effect?
Sorry,
So-
excuse me, Unsu just pointed out that it should actually be county chapter 4.107, not 4.017. So just want to put that into the record. We'll get it fixed.
You'll get it corrected? Okay.
Yes,
So the chapter again is incorrectly stated, and you stated it correctly at
yes.
1 point. Okay, great. Thank you for that correction. So may I have a motion to that effect with the correction on the chapter title?
So move.
So moved by Councilmember Cole. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Schwan. Lisa, could you take a roll call vote, please?
Schwang,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
May,
Yes.
Krolik,
Yes.
Royce.
Yes, motion carries. And Mandy and Yusu, thank you very much. Appreciate your presentations. With that, we'll move to the next agenda item, and that's new business. We have 4 items under new business. Item number 7, entitled Resolution Regarding the Receipt and Use of Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds from the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, will be presented by City Manager Ann Ritzma. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council, as well as our Hillsborough community. Tonight, I want to walk you through the American Rescue Plan Act funding that has come to the town of Hillsborough. Next slide, please. As you may remember, the American Rescue Plan was passed to the tune of $1.9 trillion. It was a relief package for cities, counties, and organizations across the United States. It was in response to the need for public health emergency funding. It was established to provide premium pay for essential workers or grants to their employers. It was also to help local government recoup from revenue loss. And it was also moving forward to fund sewer, water, and broadband infrastructure to begin to rebuild and build back. The town of Hillsborough received $2.7 million. Next slide, please. The funding comes with very narrow guidelines in terms of how cities may spend the money. The first is, of course, in that first group, which is the public health response to COVID-19. That money can be used to mitigate and do prevention activities, cover medical expenses for care and services for short and long-term needs, address the behavioral health impacts, mental health and substance misuse. It can also be used for public health and safety staff as for payroll and benefits. And it can also be used to address disparities in public health outcomes. Next slide, please. The second group of activities that the funds can be used for are to mitigate negative economic impacts. This can go directly to help households and individuals who are impacted by COVID-19. It can assist small businesses. It can allow local government to address the impact that COVID-19 may have had on its ability to deliver general services, and for those communities that had to lay off staff to rehire those staff. In addition to that, communities that have industries that had to close during COVID-19 can use the funds for those industries, and it has expanded uses for those communities that were hit hardest by COVID-19. Next slide, please. The third category is premium pay for essential workers. This premium pay is $13 an hour or more, but not to exceed $25,000 per year. This does not actually apply to us as a local government agency in the Bay Area, but is very important to some of our neighboring communities and other areas in California. Next slide, please. So how can this city spend money if there was revenue loss? The guidelines under revenue loss ask that a community compare its actual pandemic era revenue to an estimate of revenue if there were no pandemic. So the delta between the two. The federal government has actually given us a calculator based on an assumption that there would be 4.1% growth. And it turns out when we put the calculator in, we would be eligible for $3.3 million from the revenue just based on the calculator. Revenue loss is different for every community. They have a variety of ways in which you can calculate that revenue loss over different time periods. But for us in particular, we would be eligible to use the money just on revenue loss alone at 3.3 million. It also does give broad latitude for us to use funds for government services that would be infrastructure maintenance or pay-as-you-go infrastructure projects such as roads, cybersecurity, environmental remediation, or the provision of public safety for police and fire. Next slide, please. Finally, that last group of projects that these funds can be used for are primarily for water and sewer infrastructure. Very focused at drinking water infrastructure, such as building or upgrading our facilities, our distribution and our storage systems, as well as wastewater infrastructure. And it also includes the ability to use this for eligible clean water state revolving fund projects, as well as stormwater. And just kind of a note at the bottom, if you can remember the tagline, Build Back Better, which incorporate resiliency, green infrastructure, and lead to better service lines. Next slide, please. The last piece of the infrastructure piece is on broadband infrastructure, especially reaching out to underserved communities and building reliable fiber optic systems that would address what many underserved communities experienced, which was when everything went online during COVID-19, they found it very difficult to connect, to go to school, to do work remotely. Next slide, please. So how can cities spend the money? There are certainly ineligible uses. We can't use it to offset tax cuts. We can't deposit it into any kind of pension funding or rainy day funds. We can't fund any kind of debt service or legal settlements. And We can't use it for other types of general infrastructure outside of broadband, water, sewer, and storm drains. So next slide, please. Part of the details, and we've worked very closely with our legal counsel, BBK, on looking to make sure that the projects and uses of these funds will conform with the American Rescue Plan. We are a non-entitlement units town, which means that we receive the $2.7 million based solely on our population size. We received in July $1.362 million, and we will receive a second in July of 2022, same amount. We must obligate all the funds by December 31st of 2024. That means that we need to have the projects and contracts in place, and we need to spend all of our funds by 2026, so we need to return them. I mentioned the prohibited uses. All of the American Rescue Plan funds require reporting back to both the state and the federal government. Our first report is due October 31st of 2021, and that's part of the reason that this presentation is before you and the resolution is before you tonight, so that we can report back what we anticipate using the funds for. Jan and her staff will be making sure that we properly spend funds, as well as prepare for a single audit and adhere to all of the uniform guidance for type of funding that we're receiving from the federal government. We also think that it's important that we track the projects that we commit to and post them on the town's website, so that our residents know how that we're spending the money, very much like a dashboard that we've been using for the impact of COVID. Next slide, please. So staff has spent some considerable time looking at the types of projects that are both eligible and are also high priority items for the town of Hillsborough. The first two high priority items really fall into the infrastructure category, and that's the Highline Water Project. This would provide dependable water source in the event of an emergency, such as an earthquake. Staff estimates that we need $1.2 million to get that project going, and could expend those funds in the time period that we are eligible to do the project. In addition to that, we can tackle storm drain projects at $1.17 million. This would address climate change as well as improve our reliability. The next group of expenses that we looked at were actually COVID-related expenses. And although our buildings have provided safe facilities for many of our staff, we still need to bring several of the areas up to compliance in the event of future pandemic issues, as well as providing for safe circulation. We discovered that some of our HVAC needed to be replaced in order to make sure that we had adequate ventilation. So those are COVID expenses. We also realized that in another category, there were many kinds of infrastructure, internal infrastructure that we could improve upon, so that we could have remote information available to the public, as well as provide for hybrid types of meetings, allow for renovation within the building that would allow for the public to meet comfortably and provide for adequate spacing. So we've identified a records and agenda software upgrade that will allow the public to access online meetings. We've looked at the council chambers and the types of furniture and AV equipment we have that would allow us to have accessible and reliable and safe public meetings. And then lastly, we've looked at reconfiguring some workspaces and improving our IT cybersecurity and phone system. Our IT and phone system were critical during the pandemic and continue to be critical. And we want to make sure that we have safe facilities that are also secure and dependable. So those are the project summary. There is more detail in both the staff report and the attachment to the resolution. Next slide, please. So with that, the next steps are to review the staff recommendations for our projects and provide us with feedback. If the council is ready, they can adopt the resolution approving the projects that are listed. And then additionally, we'd like you to direct staff to develop that dashboard for the town website and any other public communications on the progress of these projects. And then lastly, we'd like you to direct staff to complete the Treasury guidelines and make sure that we meet all of the reporting requirements. Those are all outlined in the resolution, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or take direction from the council.
Thank you, Ann. Appreciate that. Let's go to the council and see if they have any questions for Ann. Councilmember Swan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ann, for your presentation. I don't have any questions other than, commend you for identifying those projects that is timely, and appreciate the fact that there are going to be dashboard and details put into the treasurer guideline and reporting, so that, for the transparency, the public would have a chance to review them and understand the progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cole.
Thank you, Anne. Great presentation. Could we go back to the slide before this last slide? I just have a question for clarification. Regarding records and agenda software compared to chambers, furniture, and AV equipment, could you just clarify for me the difference between those two priorities in terms of specific materials?
So the records and agenda software really provides for online access to town records. It allows us to not only scan, but catalog all of our paper records. We found going to paper files very difficult when people were working remotely, and it was very difficult also for our public to access the records that they were looking for. With the agenda software, now that we are recording meetings and we're attaching the recordings to our online agenda, we have found that there are a variety of software packages that help integrate that so that an individual can watch a video, read the staff report, and have all the agenda information at their fingertips. And we also discovered during the pandemic that the agenda software that we're using now will no longer be supported. So we are going to have to move forward in order to have something that's stable and reliable, both for the council and the public. In the chambers AV equipment, we anticipate that we will be doing hybrid meetings, a room with a Zoom, and that is going to require some upgrades to our AV equipment so that we can comfortably have both a Zoom online presence as well as a in-person presence.
Okay, thank you. Thanks again for the presentation.
Councilmember May.
Thanks, Ann. I wanted to focus on the Highline Water Project. And it's not that I disagree with the priority. I think it should be the highest priority. But in terms of how do we commit to a project where our ability to do the project is dependent upon other communities? Are they going to be also allocating their funds towards a Highline, or is this still aspirational from our standpoint?
I think I'll turn this to our Public Works Director, Paul Willis, who has been quite successful in the last several months in meeting with our partners on this project.
Thank you for the question, Mr. May. And yes, that's correct. As the city manager just mentioned, we've been meeting with the partners and discussing and going over with them several of the alternatives that are available to them. We've had very good meetings with the city of Millbrae, who's actually ready to go forward with even an informal memorandum of understanding or just agreement, so we can get off the ground with them regarding the project, because they found that at least one or two of the alignments right now will also meet up with their long-term master plans, which would also save them money in the long term as far as reducing and replacing older infrastructure. So there are some improvements and some savings to them for ongoing operations and maintenance. But everyone agrees that the biggest reason to do this is for dependable water sources in the event of a significant emergency, whether it's the big one, a large earthquake, or a large fire, or a fire that originates from the SFPUC watershed that would blow easterly onto the town's property or into the town's jurisdiction. So that would provide improvements to our neighbors at Millbrae as well as Burlingame. Burlingame has been more hesitant as far as initial participation. They do see value. Their footprint may be not as large as the towns and our partners. So as part of our ongoing agreements and working with them, we'll have to come up with a funding plan to determine what percentage of share each city would like to participate in. If one of the partners, for example, Burlingame, chooses they don't want to participate, then we would simply decrease the size and diameter of the pipeline to a proper size that would just serve the communities that want to participate. However, that would not help them in the event if there was a significant emergency. So that's the only oversight that they would have to really decide carefully. As of last week, we rekindled and re-met with the SFPUC just to make sure it's upfront with them. We met with their assistant general manager, Steve Ritchie, and they do have a new regional manager. So Dennis Deemer, myself, and Natalie Gribben met with them just to make sure they're up to speed with the latest on the project. So it's continuing, and I hope it wasn't too much information there, Mr. Meg. I know we haven't reported back to you in quite a while, but a lot of good information as far as where we're at and our opportunities and partnership.
So I guess I have the question: if Burlingame chooses not to participate, how does this pipeline go over City of Burlingame property at all? Are there existing easements?
Right, that's correct. So Burlingame has already told us if we had to choose an alignment, they would prefer the alignment that impacts the least amount of the local residents. And so they've looked at that, and they would prefer a higher alignment, which is along Skyline, versus a midpoint that might go through schools and some other more densely populated areas with single family residents. So yeah, so they could steer us towards that upper alignment, and that actual upper alignment may be the preferred one as far as reducing our costs anyway, because it crosses the least amount of faults.
Okay. And then Burlingame Hills, County of San Mateo, how do they participate, or is it not relevant?
Well, the regional or their local supplier of water, my understanding is the city of Burlingame, even though, so they provide their water to them.
Okay, great. So we have contingency plans if Burlingame chooses not to participate. Good.
That's correct.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome.
Vice Mayor Krolik.
Yeah, just to continue with what Larry just brought up, Paul. So do you see any problems with obligating those funds for a Highline Water project by 2024?
Sorry. I'm so used to muting myself every time so you don't hear the outside noise. So no, I don't see a problem with that, because the overall cost of the project is going to be significantly more. So this would certainly get us through the initial soft cost stage, the environmental planning stage, and the meetings that are necessary with the SFPUC groups and the other agencies that are involved. I did forget to mention this. If we do go through for example, Burlingame's property, and they don't fully participate, we would still apply for an encroachment permit because we would have the right to use the public right of way to put in our pipeline, whether they choose to participate or not. So their participation could be in the form of non-monetary, but granting us a permit to construct.
And same with storm drains. Do you see any problem with obligating those funds by 2024? And with both projects, spending them by 2026?
No, storm drains, actually, we have, unfortunately, more than 30 years of deferred maintenance that we could easily spend that money quite quickly.
Oh, okay, great. And then I think it's my last question. I guess it's either Anne or Christopher. If we adopt this resolution, does that mean we're committing to spending this money on these 6 things, or is this still in the consideration phase?
Want to take that, Ann, or do you want me to?
This would be our initial report of what we intend to spend. But this is open to change over time.
So is this, it's more informational then? Because obviously we do have plenty of time, and we just did find out that we got half this money and we have the other half coming in a year.
That's correct, but we also wanted to make sure that the public understood, because they know half the money is going to local jurisdictions now, and we wanted to make sure that we had something in place.
Vice Mayor Krolik, I would just add a little bit to that to indicate that, a lot of this is all contingent on the guidance that the federal government's providing in terms of how we can spend the funds. There is a final interim rule that they did issue back in May, I believe. They're still taking some comments on that, but this is our best assessment of the use of the funds. Of course, if we get additional information from the federal government that indicates something may be off the table, we come back to you to explore that a bit and see if there's some other projects that the town would like to explore.
So just to be clear, if we take the recommendation, adopt the resolution regarding the receipt and use of the funds, does that just mean we're accepting the funds? We're not obligating to spend them in this particular budgeted way? That's still, so we're not approving these expenditures, we're just accepting the funds, is that right?
We said that we would use the funds as outlined in Exhibit A, but that can always be amended. Any of these projects, any of the larger projects actually will have to be approved by council with a contract, and they would come back. The Highland Water Project, the storm drain project, both of the IT software, agenda management, those projects would come back to the council. And certainly if something does change with the federal government and their interpretations, we will have to come back and look at those projects if they are no longer eligible.
Thank you. I guess I would have some more questions on the town hall infrastructure projects, because looking long-term, we may be, relocating town hall, and, I would love to see more detail and more discussion with council on some of this $100,000 expenditures.
Vice Mayor Krolik, the details of those are actually in the attachment 2 to the resolution. And it is, and we have outlined what those changes are in terms of the furniture changes and configuring the space. It really is to make sure that we can open appropriately to the public in October. So we're not knocking any walls down or doing any of that kind of remodeling.
And is all of this movable if town hall
Yes.
wants to be?
Yes. Chairs and partitions and cubicles.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have right now.
Okay.
Thank you. I would only note that I like your allocations. Clearly, I support the comments made earlier about the Highline Water Project and storm drains. Clearly of great importance to the town. So, and I noted that 3 of the 6 are priority items, and 2 of them are at least, or 3 of the other 3 seem to be directly related to the COVID circumstances we're in. Although I think the Vice Mayor raised a good point about our ability to use it long term if we move city town hall. So I appreciate you following up on that. Just a quick question from a procedural standpoint. we're adopting the resolution which authorizes the receipt and then the use of the funds in this way, although we later can change them and we later can adjust them. But with respect to items 3 and 4, the next steps, they would take, do you need a resolution on those as well, Christopher, items 3 and 4?
Thank you, Mayor. I think all of the items are within the body of the resolution, but Ann can correct me if that is incorrect.
Okay, I didn't see 3 and 4 on the body, but maybe I misread it, but.
3 and 4.
Got it. So the ARPA dashboard and then directing staff to complete the treasury guidelines and reporting. Is that the two you're speaking about?
Yes, yes.
Those are not in the resolution. They would just be part of a minute action.
So we should have okay, when we move, we should include that in our motion, I assume then. Okay,
Yes.
I have no further questions then. Let's close. Let's go to public comment. And if we could open for public comment and see if there's any hands raised. Lisa?
And no raised hands, Mayor.
Okay. With that, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the council for any follow-up questions or comments. Councilmember Schwang, do you have any follow-up questions or comments?
No follow-up questions.
Councilmember Cole?
None.
Councilmember May?
None.
Vice Mayor Krolik?
None.
And I have none. So with that, may I have a motion to adopt the resolution regarding the receipt and use of the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds to the American Rescue Act of 2021 and to direct staff to develop an ARPA dashboard for the town website and other public communications on the progress, and to direct staff to complete the treasury guidelines and reporting.
So move.
Moved by Councilmember Schwang. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Cole. Lisa, could we take a roll call vote, please?
Fong,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
May,
Yes.
Krolik,
Yes.
Royce.
Yes. Motion carries 5-0. And Ann, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good news, every time we get money, although we clearly incurred some expenditures that are a direct result of use for this. Item number 8 then on the calendar, on the agenda, is entitled Introduction of Ordinance Amending Chapter 15.29 Water Conservation and Landscape Requirements of the Hillsborough Municipal Code relating to water efficient landscape regulations. And this will be presented by Senior Management Analyst Mandy Brown. Mandy, we're keeping you busy tonight, so the floor is yours.
Happy to be here. Good evening again, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council. I'll be presenting on this. This is part of the larger SB 1383 monster item that we talked about last month. So we're kicking it off with a couple ordinance updates. And so I will just begin by, and every time I bring forward an item, I'm going to kind of bring this master chart back of all of the different things that we'll have to do and just make sure we have a progress report. And over time, we'll be able to say this has been updated and done, and eventually we'll work our way through the entire chart. So this is the first one. So updating the WELLO ordinance, having to do with compliance and enforcement. And this is really making sure that when that January 1st deadline hits, that we are compliant with all of the requirements that are outlined in SB 1383. So in the staff report, and I've tried to update it, include it here, it's a lot of text, so I apologize. The SB 1383 requirements are really in line with the State Department of Water Resources, as well as the specific requirements in the state legislation. And what that means for the updates to the ordinance is requirements for the landscape design plans, specifically really about soil preparation, mulch, and amendments. So it's requiring that soil amendments be incorporated according to the recommendations of the soil report. For landscape installations, there's requirements for compost use. There's also minimum requirements in depth for mulch layers for exposed soil surfaces. And then there is a preference for organic mulch materials from recycled or post-consumer material. And that kind of goes back to all of the mulch that we're going to be required to purchase. This is sort of a preference for that mulch material rather than other wood chip mulch material, so that we're creating more organic material. So it's sort of building in a market for it by adding this provision into the MWELO requirements. And then this is just the different types of properties that it applies to. New construction projects greater than or equal to 500 square feet. And then rehab landscape projects with an aggregate landscape area of greater than or equal to 2,500 square feet. And the updates to the MWELO are really just very narrowly what's required out of SB 1383. There's no extras, no additional inclusions in there. It's really just what is required by the state legislation. Any additional cleanup or modifications, I will leave in the very capable hands of Sarah Fleming. So this is just very narrowly focused on SB 1383. So here's the staff recommendation, and I will take any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mandy. Appreciate it. We'll now ask my colleagues individually if they have any questions. Councilmember Schwan,
No.
Councilmember Cole,
No question.
Councilmember May,
None.
Vice Mayor Krolik,
None.
and I have no questions. It seems pretty straightforward. So with that, we'll now open for public comment. Lisa, if you can let me know if there's any hands raised.
So give it a moment. No hands raised, Mayor.
Okay, with that, we'll close public comment, and I'll just ask the council members one last time if they have any further questions or comments. Councilmember Schwan,
None.
Councilmember Cole,
None.
Councilmember May,
None.
Vice Mayor Krolik,
No.
and I have none. So with that, Mandy, I want to thank you for the presentation. It's very thorough, obviously. With that, may I have a motion to introduce the ordinance entitled Ordinance of the City Council of the Town of Hillsborough, amending Chapter 15.29 of the Hillsborough Municipal Code relating to water efficient landscape regulations. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Moved by Vice Mayor Krolik. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Cole. Lisa, could you please take a roll call vote?
Schwam,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
May,
Yes.
Krolik,
Yes.
Royce.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries 5-0. Mandy, thank you. With that, we'll move to item number 9 on the agenda, titled Introduction of Ordinance Amending Chapter 15.18 of the Hillsborough Municipal Code regarding recycling of construction and demolition debris. And again, will be presented by Senior Management Analyst Mandy Brown. And again, as Mandy's alluded to, this is a series of different segments of Senate Bill 1383 regarding action and review by the council. So Mandy, the floor is yours.
Okay, great, thank you. The last one I promised for tonight. So this is, if possible, simpler, even than the last one, a little bit more streamlined. So the second ordinance update for this evening, again, relating to that compliance and enforcement element. The requirements for the construction and demolition debris are really in line with the California Green Building Standards Code. So it's just they kind of stuck it in there to make sure that everybody is in compliant with the green building standards. So it's really just bringing our ordinance up to that. That's bringing up to 65% of non-hazardous materials to be recycled or salvaged. And in speaking with Tim Anderson and Building and Planning Department, he said that a lot of folks are already doing this already. And what I neglected to mention at the Willow presentation, but also this one, is the great thing about this is every jurisdiction is putting in all of these rules. So while they'll sort of learn it through the town as they work with us and the ordinance updates, as these contractors are working with other jurisdictions, they'll be facing the same changes if they have not already done so. So that's the benefit of the statewide action. Again, a little bit more detail on the updates, the waste diversion rate. So increasing, we're currently at 50%, bringing it up to 65%. requiring submittal of a waste reduction plan, requiring subcontractors to comply with the ordinance, and then verifying that universal waste items are properly disposed of. And as I said, anecdotally, Tim said that a lot of the contractors are already doing most, if not all of these things, just what he had said in passing. And here's the staff recommendation. And again, very narrow, just what's required out of SB 1383. I'll leave all the other heavy lifting to Sarah, Tim, and all the experts. So I'll take any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mandy. Appreciate it. I will now again ask my colleagues individually if they have any questions regarding this. Councilmember Schwan.
No questions. Thank you,
Councilmember-
Mandy.
Councilmember Cole.
Just clarifications. I assume that the state has provided a site for contractors to figure out what is non-hazardous waste material. It just seemed like such a broad term. Do we know how contractors and developers will be assessing that?
CalRecycle has a lot of materials on their website. I would need to go back and check for that specific, but I've gotten lost in that website half a dozen times already with all of the different resources. But I can certainly check that for you and pass it on to building and planning as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. No further questions.
Councilmember May.
Thanks, Mandy. I don't have any questions.
Vice Mayor Krolik.
None. Thanks, Mandy.
And again, Mandy, you alluded to it a number of times, but we're not adding any burdens to a contractor that's not already consistent with what other towns are doing. Correct?
Correct.
And number two, and this is, I'm just supporting the inquiry, not going to change my support for this, but is there any additional, is the cost added to the contractors? Is that very significant? I assume it would not be, since they've already had the same requirement. We're just increasing it slightly.
Like I said, a lot of other jurisdictions already have in their ordinance these requirements since they're required in the Green Building Code. So in theory, they should already be complying with it. It's just putting a little bit more teeth behind requirements that already exist. That's my understanding of it. And Christopher can either nod or shake his head. That's incorrect. But so yeah, they should already be doing this.
So any incremental cost that they'd be incurring is not going to be a material amount that's passed on to develop into the homeowners. I would assume. So with that, let's take open public comment, see if there's any questions or comments from the public. Lisa, if you could please let me know if we have any hands raised.
No hands raised, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll close public comment. And I'll bring it back to the council for any last minute questions or comments before we entertain a motion. Councilmember Schwan.
None.
Councilmember Cole.
None.
Councilmember May.
None.
Vice Mayor Krolik.
None.
And I have none. So with that, may I have a motion to introduce the ordinance entitled Ordinance of the City Council of the Town of Hillsborough amending Chapter 15.18 of the Hillsborough Municipal Code regarding recycling of construction and demolition debris. So moved by Councilmember May. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Cole. Motion's been made and seconded. Lisa, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Schwam,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
May,
Yes.
Krolik,
Yes.
Royce.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. And Mandy, thank you. I think you're done for this evening on those presentations.
Thank you.
So, okay, with that, we'll move to agenda item number 10. And that's entitled Designation of a Voting Delegate and an Alternate Voting Delegate or Delegates to the 2021 League of California Cities Annual Conference, September 22nd through 24th, 2021. And that will be presented by our city clerk, Lisa Natusch. Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and council members. The League of California Cities, also known as Cal Cities, annual conference is scheduled for September 22nd to 24th in person in Sacramento. An important part of the annual conference is the annual business meeting that's scheduled for Friday, the 24th at 12:30 p.m. At the business meeting, the Cal Cities membership considers and takes action on resolutions that establish Cal Cities policy. This meeting is an opportunity for city and town officials to participate in the development of Cal City's policy as those resolutions that are approved by the General Assembly become Cal City's policy. So in order to vote at the annual business meeting, the City Council must designate a delegate and up to 2 alternates to attend the meeting and represent the town. And the designees must be registered to attend the conference. Councilmember Schwong and Vice Mayor Krolik are currently registered to attend. And this item is just your opportunity to designate that voting delegate and up to 2 alternates. So this concludes my very brief presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that. And it currently scheduled to be in person, although I would note that based on everything else going on, it may change to a virtual meeting before it's all done and said. But for now, it's in Sacramento.
Yes.
With that, I have not yet registered, but I plan to do so. I don't know, Larry, if you plan to register or not, and Sophie, if you plan to register or not.
Yes, I plan to register. I haven't gotten to it,
Okay.
but I will.
Councilmember May?
Yeah, I don't plan on it.
Okay, with that, comments from, we need a voting delegate and 2 alternates. Councilmember Schwong, any comments or questions?
Since the mayor is going to attend, I think the mayor should be the designated vote delegate.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councilmember Cole, any comments or questions?
I agree with Marie's recommendation.
Councilmember May,
No questions.
Vice Mayor Krolik?
I agree. You should be the voting delegate. I'd be happy to be an alternate.
Okay, I would suggest that I'm happy to be the voting delegate as mayor. I was last year and again reported back to this body. And if there's any items in advance that requires feedback, I will reach out to you. And I would suggest that Marie and Christine be the alternates since they've already registered. So with that, let me open for public comment. Do we have any public comments on this item? Lisa, any hands raised?
No hands raised, Mayor.
I will close public comment. May I have a motion to designate myself as voting delegate and Councilmember Schwong and Vice Mayor Krolik as alternates for the 2021 League of California Cities Annual Conference Annual Business Meeting on Friday, September 24th, 2021.
So move.
So moved by Councilmember Schwong. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Cole. Lisa, can I have a roll call vote?
Thank you. Schwong,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
May,
Yes.
Krolik,
Yes.
Royce.
Yes. So that concludes that segment, and that motion carries 5-0. We're now moving to informational. We have one item on informational, and that's our city manager's update. So with that, that will be presented obviously by City Manager Ann Risma. So Ann, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Tonight I have just a short update. I'm sure that we'll have a little bit more of an update as the county has resumed their briefings regarding COVID. So my focus tonight is not on new information, but information that we've already shared with the community. Next slide, please. As you know, on Tuesday, August 3rd, the county did issue a new health order requiring indoor masking for everyone, vaccinated or non-vaccinated individuals. And we have instituted that here at Town Hall, as well as all of our other town facilities. And we would encourage everyone, as the county has, to not only mask, but continue to practice good hygiene, as well as social distancing. There are lots of individuals in our community who are under 12 who are not able to get the vaccine yet. And so we all need to do our part to protect others. Next slide, please. We have posted on Town Hall and all of our town buildings some very simple informational flyers and signs, and simply wear your mask in this building regardless of vaccination status. As our mayor has indicated, things are changing. At this point right now, We anticipate having the council chambers open as a vote center from September 10th to September 15th. This will probably mean that our staff will be working remotely during that time and also working out of Little House to answer phones and provide customer service on site. We anticipate our first in-person ADRB meeting on October 4th and our first in-person city council meeting on October 11th. But please note, those are all subject to change depending on what happens and what county health orders are in place. We are currently open to the public from Monday through Thursday, 8 to 5, and on Fridays from 8 a.m. to noon. Next slide, please. Just a quick reminder, we are looking at the voluntary 15% reduction in water use. The governor has called for a voluntary 15%, and we are sending out reminders to our residents. And there are lots of little things you can do, including turning the faucet off when you're brushing your teeth and conserving outdoor water by covering your pool, sweeping and not washing off a driveway, and using a car wash for car washing. And as we noted, we have lots of good water conservation tips on our website, and we'll update some of those links that seem to have gotten a little stale. Next slide, please. Just a reminder that it is wildfire season. Our approach in this community is a fire triangle or a three-legged stool. We partner with Firewise USA. They are our neighbor helping neighbors, and they've got a great chipping program coming up for one neighborhood. They're working fast and furiously to be ready for that in September. We have our partners with CCF, our fire department, who are out doing wildland urban interface inspections, as well as assisting with all of the public education and emergency preparedness training. And then, of course, we have our town partnerships, which our code enforcement officer who is out looking at properties, our partnership with HNN, and our partnership with our CERTs. These partnerships and our three-legged stool, or as our fire folks call the triangle, give us a very good start on being a fire-safe community. Next slide, please. For those of you who live in the wildland urban interface, please note that our fire inspectors, our WUI inspectors, are out doing the WUI inspections and meeting with our residents. If anyone has any questions about an individual who might show up at the front door or front gate, all of our fire inspectors carry identification. They are wearing CCFD polos or other identifiable uniform. And if anyone has any kind of question, they can always call our police department, who can verify that these are actually public employees who are providing a service to our community. Next slide, please. A little bit more on preparedness. If you've been watching the news and you've been looking at the big fires that are occurring in Northern California, you'll be seeing lots of messages to individuals who may have to evacuate about knowing their zone. We are part of that same zone program. It's called Zone Haven. And anyone in our community can go on to the Zone Haven site and learn their zone, get that zone number. And this is how our first responders are going to communicate with us in the event of an emergency. There's going to be a message that goes out on San Mateo Alert that said zones X, Y, and Z are sheltering in place, zones B are fine, and zone C needs to pack. So please hop onto Zone Haven, find out what zone you're in Hillsborough, and know your zone. And there are great little stickers coming out soon that can go on your refrigerator that has your zone number so that you know when that happens. Next slide, please. And last but not least, if you're interested in what we're doing on a countywide basis, we're right in the process of our hazard mitigation plan. And we do invite anyone who's interested in how this plan has come together, what our natural hazards are, earthquakes, fire, flood, heat, to view the county website. And there is a public workshop coming up this Thursday night or Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock. More information on their website. I think there's one more slide. Just a quick update from the county. Vaccines are still available. Vaccine support for homebound residents is also available. They will roll, as well as you can host a vaccine party and the county will provide a van to your vaccine event. So lots of options with the county for vaccines. And I believe one more slide from the county. That's it. If you have already received your vaccine, make sure that you avail yourself of the great app that's available that can put your vaccine record on your phone. You enter your name, your date of birth, and a phone or email that was associated with your vaccine, and you will get a nifty QR code that goes with your phone. I think that was the last slide.
Thank you, Ann.
You're
Again,
welcome.
very thorough. With that, let's see if the council have any questions or comments with respect to your update. Councilmember Schwang.
Thank you, Ann, for the updates. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Cole.
Thank you, Ann. I actually have a question for Paul Willis, if he's still with us, regarding the fire mitigation. I've noticed that the Public Works has been working on easements and clearing things out and pushing back the brushes away from the easement lines. However, it seems like a lot of the debris is left there. Is it expected that the homeowners are supposed to arrange for those debris to be removed, or is that part of the work that Public Works is doing on those easements?
So Councilmember Cole, there are a couple things you may have been noticing. And so just to clarify, so we do wildland fire mitigation. We had a grant several years ago, and we spent quite a bit of money to do that. And then every year we do some reduction to continue to maintain what we have removed. There are some areas where we do clear and they will be picked up by a separate crew later on. But there's actually some areas that, for example, some branches and things that have to be stacked in a certain way because they are actually protecting some wildland or habitat for local species that were identified by our environmental consultant. So you might be seeing a combination of one or the other, either some debris, if it does have leaves that will be pulled, but if it looks like twigs and small branches that are stacked neatly, oftentimes that's for habitat as advised by our consultant.
And I'll also add that we are working with PG&E, who has come in and done some significant tree work, and the limbs from that tree work are still down. This was brought to our attention by Firewise, and I am working with our PG&E consultant to get those crews to come back and remove those branches.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Ann.
You're welcome.
Councilmember May.
No questions, but great report, Ann.
Vice Mayor Krolik.
No, just a suggestion that QR code, and Mandy might be on this already because she's so good with the town's e-announce, but that My Vaccine Record site might be great for the e-announce.
Right. And the only comment I have, getting back to following up on Councilmember Cole on wildfire prevention, and this might be off the agenda, so if it is, just tell me, we can discuss it offline or at a later date. I noticed that on Crystal Springs Road, going towards the Crystal Springs Shopping Mall, the side of the hill has been populated with goats over the last week. Well over 100 goats. Not only are they cute looking at, but they seem to be doing a heck of a job clearing all that debris and all that brush along that whole entire hillside or on that 3 to 5 mile distance there. Or maybe it's 2 to 3 miles. I'm terrible with distance. Have we given any thought to the town employing any goats, Paul? And I'll direct this to Paul on some of our city property that seems to have a lot of brush on it. Is that even a feasible option for us? And I do know some citizens, individual residents have employed goats for their backyards when they've had big open lots. But is that an option we've given any thought to?
We've inquired with the goat companies. Goats R Us, I think, is one of the companies that does it. And they do it for the SFPUC, and that property you saw is the SFPUC's area that's behind that retaining wall, especially that is on Crystal Springs on the way to the shopping center. And they've done it on a lot of their areas because you can leave a group of goats and they'll eat all of the brush down to the dirt, and they're very efficient. We've looked at it, especially some of the open space areas, but we haven't had any interest yet from the herders or the companies that maintain them. If they're left overnight, they actually have to have a trailer and the herder that's responsible for them to watch them overnight. So the goats, are maybe susceptible to other predators, but they also bring their own protection, which are very large dogs to watch them as well. But yeah, just so far we've reached out and there has been no interest, even if we entertain RFPs. I know through the city manager, she was looking at other options. I believe there were mules, is that right?
Mules.
Yes.
Mules?
So one of the goat companies is now purchasing the retired mules from Yosemite. And the mules tend to not eat down to the dirt. And so for individuals who have landscaping and other plants or trees that they want protected, the mules are a little slower, but they're a little more discerning with what they eat.
I only noted because on Crystal Springs Road, where the Meadowwood Estates are, and that SFPUC property that parallels that entire road, that brush seems to be pretty heavy. And I noticed residents in the past have expressed some concern over the potential fire danger there. So I don't know. It sounds, Paul, like you talked to SFPUC and they don't have an interest in pursuing it, but I do know there is some concern among residents where I live about that area. So I would just note it, and we may want to explore that further.
Okay.
So with that, Ann, I want to compliment you again on a great report. And I also want to compliment you on the Thursday editions of what's going on in town. Well done. So thank you very much. And with that, I have no further comments on it. And we'll move on to public comment number 2. Let me read it again. You're probably tired of me reading this, but we're required to. As a reminder, members of the public may provide public comments on items not on the agenda by using the raise hand feature or if calling in by phone by pressing *9 on the telephone keypad. If there appears to be a large number of speakers, speaking time may be reduced to no less than 2 minutes. If you do push *9 or the raise hand feature, the town will unmute the speaker and allow them to speak for up to 3 minutes. Members of the public are limited to 1 comment at this time. State law prohibits the council from discussing or acting on non-agenda items and generally limits the ability of the council to respond to any public comments made regarding non-agenda items. So with that, I'll open public comment. Lisa, do we have any hands raised?
Yes, David Weinberg.
David, welcome. The floor is yours. Listen, if you can unmute yourself.
I'm working on it.
Remind us, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Yep.
Okay. I just want to remind us that with the water, there are a lot of people who have water fountains and these sort of, they recirculate and so forth. But I think with what we're getting into in the 15% already, that we might consider in the e-announcement suggesting they may want to turn those off for the rest of this drought. That's my comment.
Thank you. Good idea. Okay. Are there other public comments?
No additional raised hands, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate your comments, David. With that, we'll bring it back to council. Any comments by council on any public comment item? Did I see any hands raised? Lisa? Can you help me? Any council members have hands raised?
No hands raised.
Okay, great. With that, we'll close public comment and we'll move it to city council item. And this is a period of the council meeting where any council member can report back on committees and activities that they have been participating since the last council meeting. Councilmember Schwan.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to tack on to City Manager Risma's report about, so Hillsborough Neighborhood Network, HNN, has been working closely with the town and focusing on promoting the Know My Zone. So we're recruiting zone captains, and the team is planning on perhaps going forward tabletop exercise on the evacuation plan. And hopefully that would be getting the residents more engaged on knowing their zone and knowing to sign up on the SMC alert and to be able to exercise when come calling to evacuate safely.
Great, thank you. And I know there will be a presentation, I think, to council in October or some period in the future regarding this. But Marie, thank you for following up.
Correct.
Great. Councilmember Cole?
No further comments. Thank you.
Councilmember May?
I only wanted to comment that the Audit and Finance Committee of PCE met this morning, and we received presentations from our two investment managers about our investment portfolio performance for the last year. I want to say it was not negative, but barely. So I would assume part of the reason we had that issue is we did switch management of half of our portfolio to someone who is going to focus on environmentally, social, and governance positive investments. And we switched in April of 2020, just as interest rates went to almost zero. So I don't know whether the town will be receiving a similar presentation anytime soon, but it was very sobering with the expectation that interest rates are for governmental entities like ours will be in the very low range. There will not be any significant interest rate increases for 2 years. It was both of our investment managers' prediction. So,
thank you, Larry. Appreciate that. Interesting. Vice Mayor Krolik.
Yeah, I have three quick committee reports. One was commute.org, which actually their meeting was in June, but I think our July meeting was going so late, I deferred that. So a couple of things out of that. The California Air Resources Board has money becoming available to change over fleets. And I know here in Hillsborough, we've been looking at some electric vehicles, so perhaps we could access some of those dollars. And then commute.org also is asking us to ask our residents to be mindful of their online ordering activity so that decreased delivery trips could help to reduce congestion and lower emissions. So that might be something we could bring up at the Communications Committee tomorrow. And then they do have tools to encourage carpooling, and maybe we could look at that in Hillsborough for schools or for work. And they, besides the carpool incentive program, they have a bicycle incentive program. And they also have incentive for carpooling through employers. I don't know if the town of Hillsborough has looked at that as an employer. Okay, and they do, and commute.org expects after Labor Day that traffic will be back to pre-pandemic levels. All right, and I went to Domestic Violence Council, and there was just an interesting presentation on, it was sort of a grim report, but they looked at the lethality assessment, and if there is, this is probably maybe not new news to our police department, but drug and alcohol, prior threats, weapon familiarity, and suicidal thoughts by the perpetrator that can all lead to the death of the victim. More than pre-homicide, more than 44% of abusers were arrested. 33% of the victims contacted the police, but only 4% stayed in a shelter or accessed services. So the first responders are critical. In San Mateo County, the first responders can refer to CORA, the Community Overcoming Relationship Abuse. And the goals for the first responders should be to connect victims with services, not just about offender prosecution, which is often problematic. And Mike Callaghy, our county manager, as you know, I think most of you know, was a former police officer in San Mateo. He said that in his experience, choking was a very important indicator of, about whether there would be further violence that could possibly lead even to death. That's so grim that my third report is not as grim. It was Airport Roundtable, and the roundtable is working on, as always, reducing the noise. There was an issue percolating at the roundtable about our neighbor to the south, Palo Alto, asking to join the San Mateo County roundtable. I did speak up on behalf of Hillsborough, saying that there already is a Santa Clara County, Santa Cruz County roundtable, and that perhaps the noise impact, even though Palo Alto does have, similar to Portola Valley, some noise impact, is not as great as those of us who are closer to the airport. So I suggested that perhaps Hillsborough would not be in favor of having Palo Alto join the roundtable. And those are my 3 committee reports.
Thank you, Christine. I've got 2 committee reports and a couple other matters I wanted to report. One is with the South Bay Waste Management. My report is brief. We have been discussing the same things we talked about tonight, and that's Senate Bill 1383 and the various repercussions of it and sample model ordinances for cities to adopt. So the discussion here tonight was pretty much the same discussions we've been having over the past few committee meetings. So that's been the bulk of that. Secondarily, I want to thank Christine for participating in the SFO roundtable. I had a conflict and she participated as the alternate for the SFO and did a great job for everything I heard, which is not unexpected at all. But I did participate in the ground-based noise subcommittee of the SFO, and we did get authorization to send a letter with respect to including the lower decibels, the ground-based noise, and some of their noise annoyance reports, and giving a greater focus on that, because that's a particular relevance to Hillsborough, the takeoff and the departure noise. And so we have a special focus on that. Secondarily, some of you may have heard from residents over the past few weeks about noise early in the morning, 3 to 4 to 5 o'clock. I know I've probably gotten a dozen different inquiries. I did check with the airport, and that is due to a change in runways, because they're currently removing tire debris on the existing runways, because with all the increase in departures of the last 30 to 60 days, they've accumulated rubber on the concrete, which has posed a safety hazard. That noise in the morning should be terminated. Now, it's meant to be temporary, although I did hear it again this morning, but that is supposed to be a short-term problem. But if you hear anything about it, please let me know, but I think that's being resolved. And last but not least, there's a legislative subcommittee of the SFO that I chair. We're going to explore the topic of supersonic aircraft, which is a concern. It's probably 3 or 4 years away, but you may be aware that there's been a movement to reauthorize supersonic flights. And there's some concern over whether or not San Francisco would be an eligible airport for them. And that would be a major problem for, I think, for all of us. So we're going to explore that topic. So if you have any thoughts on that, please let me know. Those are the 2 committees. 3 other items I just want to bring your attention. Marie and I are a subcommittee on behalf of the council with Eucalyptus Pathway. Progress has been slow. I think Marie would agree with me on that. But we do have a meeting with the interested parties coming up in a couple of weeks. That would include Burlingame Country Club, Hillsborough Beautification Foundation in the town. And we're going to try to get some parties face-to-face, knock on wood, and see if we can't move this forward. It's been a slow progress. And I know some of you on the council have had experience with this in the past, but that is moving forward. And then second thing has been some citizens in town. One in particular, I just want to bring your attention, a young student at Crocker who wants to raise money to plant trees at some of our schools. And the vice mayor and I met with her, and Mandy was involved in that meeting, and we are trying to explore that. And she is but one of a couple different local students that really want to help the town in beautification efforts, environmental efforts. So if you know of any, let us know about it. But it's really pleasing to see the enthusiasm and the interest of our students and what they want to do on behalf of the town. That speaks well for all of them and for us. And then last but not least, and I don't want to steal Christine's thunder, but she did call with Sarah Fleming. We had a meeting around ADUs. We're sort of exploring what the pros and cons and options are with ADUs, what some of the benefits are, and what some of the options that city might have. And so there is a sort of a review of that that's being conducted through the Building and Planning Commission with Christine as the commissioner and Sarah Fleming as the director. So that's been going on too. Those are my reports. I think that's all I had. Are there any other comments by council before we move to the last item on the agenda? Seeing none, let's move to the last item on the agenda, which is mayor's applause, which is always my favorite part of these meetings. This evening, I'm very pleased to recognize our Building and Planning Department, and particularly Sarah Fleming, the director, and the members of that committee, Sarah and Christina and Tim Anderson and Linda and Liz, the entire group. And the reason I want to recognize them is the California Department of Housing and Community Development just released an update to the Senate Bill 35 statewide determination summary. And Hillsborough is one of only 29 jurisdictions in the entire state not subject to the streamlining provisions of this bill. We are exempted because we met our RHNA numbers and submitted our 2020 annual progress report, which was internally prepared, by the way. Now, I did go through the data, and there's, by my count, there's over 582 jurisdictions that had to submit reports and were subject to this bill. And we're one of only 29. And that's a real tribute to our Building and Planning Department. I just want to give a shout out to them because I know the effort and the time that it took to prepare that report, to meet our goals. And it's a great accomplishment for the town. And although we've got big challenges come up over the next 8-year cycle, this really gets us off to a great start. So shout out to them. And so thank you to them, and want to recognize them. So hands up. I also want to ask Christine as our ADRB commissioner if she'd like to say a few words on that as well. So Vice Mayor, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a great accomplishment. And thank you, Sarah. Thank you to you and your team. I don't think that Liz is on the call right now, but for those of you who don't know, Liz Reese, her family is relocated to Davis with her husband and her 2 beautiful children, and she is helping to transition things over to Linda Robertson. And we also have to welcome Sarah Boab as new associate planner. So Sarah, you're heading up a great team. This was an incredible effort. And I think it's quite an honor to be one of only 29 jurisdictions to not have to go through the streamlining process that's outlined in SB 35. So congratulations, and please accept the thanks of the town.
Thank you. So with that, we will end on a great high note, and we will adjourn. And it is 8:30, so I think we have set a new record for the last 8 months. So
yeah,
we stand
adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.